We hold conversations weekly, 6 days out of 7, about empowering and uplifting and encouraging faith-based entrepreneurs. And um, in that journey, we talk about faith and business, we talk about health and wellness, we talk about love and relationships. And then here we're talking about spotlight and testimony. And so the point of us gathering today is we are going to shed a light on my dear sister, Lauren A. Morgan. She is an amazing woman, and I'm going to tell you more about her. But I just want to welcome, I actually just want to shout out the people that I'm seeing: Stacy, Cinyo, Candy, May, Irene, Wanda, Monique, Vivian, Cleopatra, Carrie Ann, so good to see you. Michael, I see you right there, and Pam. It's really good to see you guys, and shout out to the folks that are tuned in online. So I'm just Jerry. I do host this room, and I also assist with leading the morning room that the God Ideas Club puts on, which is Monday through Thursday. We Bible reading, we're reading Word cover to cover, Genesis to Revelations, and then we have little discussions about them afterwards. And then on Friday, we culminate with prayer and praise, and that's just a wonderful time for us to get together before one another, and just get through this thing called life together. But today, we are here to just take a little talk with Lauren. So Lauren, I'm you to just share who you are, and then we'll jump into the conversation after that. Yes, save some stuff for me. Yeah, no, I love it. I think that we cannot hear you on Restream, just so you know, which is not the biggest problem, but I just would like to alert you of that. Um, but as I'm glad you talked about, what it is you do, and I'm excited to get into your story because you have, gone through ups and downs as we all have. And I think that it's very valuable to
very long time is finding a resource for startup businesses and entrepreneurs who are within the first 1 to 3 years of business and usually have a lot more time than they have of financial resources, but they need an attorney more than the people who are established and can afford an attorney, right? Having the right foundation and legal infrastructure to start your business is so important. But I was finding that a lot of my clients were coming and they, it wasn't in their budget for an attorney to start the business the right way. But they were making so many sacrifices, so many, investments into their business that they ran a greater risk of not being protected. And so I oftentimes wanted to help them to being, like overcapacitated sometimes, so on and so forth. But to that point, what ended up happening is that I began to see the value in my educating users from a different way, a different platform. But what if there's another resource for me to be able to help people that couldn't afford me, so on and so forth. And so that's where the Legal No was birthed out of, because I'm passionate about serving and helping people make sure they have the resources that they have. And essentially with the Legal No, what we do is we equip people with being able to get legal resources reliable, a affordable, and a accessible platform. It's an online legal education platform that has contract templates, online courses to come, as well as roadmaps, checklists, and guidelines for how to navigate the legal business infrastructure that you need to start your business. For instance, if you need to have your entity set up, what type of entity do you choose? I did a workshop earlier today, actually, for 3 hours, and we covered entity setup, contracts, and trademarks. Just the overview informational about what those processes are, how you get started with them, what you need to do for it. And then the online platform is going to have courses that will walk you through the actual trademark process if you need to do a trademark on your own, right? Just to have those protections starting out. It will have contract templates that will be able to get you set up with the business basics that you need for your contracts, as well as some of the video directions to walk you through it and know how to actually customize your contract for your clients and understand it more. So that is what the Legal No is. I'm super excited about it. It's been in the works behind the scenes for years, and it's finally coming full circle into fruition. Today was the inaugural class and launch date for that. So yes, I'm excited.
Yes, and you should be. You should be so proud. That's amazing. And I just love that it's going to be helping others, in a way that is super necessary. Because I know a lot of people are going down the path of entrepreneurship right now, but I think it sometimes is a little bit more nuanced as far as protecting yourself. And if you don't have people supporting you, or maybe you're the first entrepreneur in your family, you don't really know what to do. So it's great that you're offering something that is going to be especially useful. Um, it's good to see you, Erin, down there. I'm glad that you are tuned in. And thank you to all the ladies down there also who are tuned in. So, Lauren, you're also an author of a book called Faithfully Yours, A Journey from Deception to Promise. It's a three-part book that's coming out this fall. And so about it and tell us about the inspiration for the book.
As you mentioned, it is coming out in the fall of this year, but essentially it's my personal testimony. And I mentioned before that I was navigating successful business and personal relationships and what that looks like. And that's just who Lauren Morgan is, right? And that's the brand that I want to sell and people to know, not just the business side of me, but the personal side as well. And so it's my personal testimony and story about navigating relationships and dealing with, just toxic cycles and how you continue to stand in faith for God's best when that's what you're experiencing, especially coming out of the church. So in particular, there was a season of my life, and I call it the counterfeit season, where I was in a cycle with the guy that I was dating, and I believed he was my husband. And for about 5 years of my life, 3 years of dating him off and on in that cycle, and 2 years of healing, it kind of paralyzed me and distracted me away from the focus and purpose that God had called me to in the long run. So that's what Faithfully Yours is about. It talks about just the how I ended up there, where I was coming from, some stories around that relationship, as well as when I came out of it, the healing that had to happen within me, some of the triggers and traumas that I realized I was dealing with that ended me in the toxic relationship in the first place. as well as just the journey to healing after that. Like, how do you date as a Christian? We don't really talk about it in the church, but figuring that out and navigating that, and just having experiences, right? And so the book is really based upon um, Revelations 12:9, where it talks about uh, we live not or just we overcome by the blood of the lamb and the word of our testimony, by not living our lives unto death. And so that testimony piece is a present testimony, our past testimonies, and for future tense, right? So we can share what's happening that we're going through right now in the present and be able to relate to someone else, and it will prevent us from having to go through it. In the past, we can look back over what God has done for us, and we can rejoice and be encouraged to go forward. But in the future, as I mentioned, we can look back over that as well and be encouraged and say, well, I've already gone through this. I'm going to do better. I'm not going to repeat that cycle, or I can prevent somebody else from repeating that cycle. So the book, like I said, is really a testimony through that season, through my healing process after that, and how I learned to relationships and being able to go and have healthy opposite sex friendships with men, and date in a healthy sense, where I wasn't always looking for marriage, and I wasn't, having so many expectations on the other person, but still being willing to and able to hold my standards, in what I was looking for, and not, compromise on. So that is what the book is about in a very high level. Sorry, I'm sure you feel free to ask me some more specific questions, and we can delve into that.
Yeah, I was actually curious about the expectations part. I was because I'm glad that you mentioned that it had to do with your expectations, because I know I struggle with that myself. Just, what is appropriate to expect in a relationship, and is it cloudy? Is the person not being clear? That was going to be my question to you. Like, were your expectations off because of things that he was doing to throw them off? Or were they off because of where you were on a mental, emotional, spiritual level, or a combination of both? Like, kind of, where were you at during that time to have fallen for that counterfeit, as you call it?
Yeah, great question. And I think it was a mixture of both, honestly. It was me not knowing my worth. I settled for a lot, not being willing to have those type of conversations, to see, what things were, not wanting to put pressure on it. And it really, I had expectations for what I thought it should look like. And when he didn't agree, I would just kind of, I felt like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Maybe I shouldn't listen. But that in and of itself was a reflection of what I saw my worth being at that time, right? And just the place of life that I was. And so for me, I really had to take some ownership and responsibility that my expectations weren't really good expectations, right? Because I ended up settling for what he was giving. But then even with that, right, I think the church doesn't, I just the single people in church, we aren't really taught and equipped and prepared for marriage. I think the church in and of itself is very reactive to marriage and not proactive. And that's not the church as a whole. Obviously, there are exceptions, but the majority and generally, I think that defines what the church represents, right? There's always exceptions. So I hope no one is offended by that. But I believe that because of that, we come out and we're looking for men in the church, or we're looking for women in the church, and there's a certain expectation for them to be perfect. There's a certain expectation for them to, look a certain type of way, be so quote unquote healed, if you will. And what does that even look like? How do we even define that? How do we even personify that to say this is what a person has to be before they get married, or this is how far they have to be in their walk with Christ, or what it needs to look like? And so even after I came from that, right, so it was a two-part. One, my worth was questionable at the time, so I settled for a lot, and I allowed him to kind of give me expectations, right, because I wasn't strong enough to put my own expectations into place. But even coming out of that, going through healing, a lot of my process in healing was, well, obviously we don't want to be unequally yoked, but what does unequally yoked mean, right? Because I can be a Christian and you can be a Christian, but we still don't actually, you're surface level Christian. We don't actually still believe the same level things, right? So it took a lot of just time and healing on my own, and asking difficult questions, asking church people difficult questions, being willing for them to look at me crazy, like, girl, what you doing? What are you doing? And I experienced some questionable things, and I think because I was willing and able to do so, God used me as a vessel to have that testimony, and I could share it, right? In particular, and I'm gonna stop after this
Oh,
because I
I
know you
think we
probably have
lost
some other
her.
questions. But in particular,
But until she
Gator
comes
Readers Who
back,
Dreaded Deadline is by far my
she was
favorite
bringing
chapter.
out some good
It's called
points
the Tea Party
about
season, and basically in
um,
this season, I had never
just
dated a man
not
before.
settling,
And when I
just
say
not
dated men,
settling,
like
and leaning
I always ended up in
into
situationships or
um,
relationships. There was always one
I'm
guy that I
sorry,
was
I'm
focused
trying to do too
on,
many things at
and
once.
somebody
And
said something
leaning,
to me one day,
leaning into
and they're like, "Well, where does
what
that come from?
we
Why
know
can't you go on
we're
multiple
supposed to
dates?
be doing.
Dating is cool.
I'm going to
Date
give her a
us
little bit of
information.
time
And if you're
to
not in
join
in
us
a
again.
relationship, why
But
wouldn't you
just
be
in
able
the
to go out
meantime, I
if you're
just
dating with
want to thank
someone
you
else
guys
as
for
a
being
friend and get
here.
to know them
This is
information?
the
And
God Ideas
you're not
Club room
into a
on Saturday
relationship with a
nights. We usually start at
crazy like
6
that,
p.m.
so why
Pacific
can't you
Standard
date?
Time.
It was a question
But
that started the
today, or
entire
in
healing
9 p.m.
process or
Eastern Time, but
dating process
today
for me.
we
And I really
started a little
sat with
bit
that for
delayed.
weeks and weeks and
Um,
talked to God, and
but we are
really found
talking
out
with Miss
a lot of
Lauren A. Morgan,
misconceptions and
and
impressions were
she is a
deceiving. Taught
business
the children to
attorney,
take them out once you get to
consultant,
church, and
and
everybody's
founder of
dating, and
Activated
you break
Law,
up and it goes
which
wrong, it
helps
doesn't work out,
people with
nothing
entity
was wrong.
setups,
Before I
trademarks,
look at you,
contract
like
and
they want to know
employment
your
law.
information and your
And
business.
then
So it's
she
so
also
much
just
pressure.
launched
We
her
don't really
very first
explore. We don't really
business
talk
called
to. We're
Legal
afraid to talk to
No.
people and get out there
And
and experience
basically,
things.
it's
And so
assisting
I
people
intentionally
with
started going
those
out with people who
very
I know I was not married.
services.
So I
So I
could
was
guard
excited
my
to have
heart
her
and have
because
expectations
she
of
wrote a book about
stop
her
looking at everyone
journey
for marriage and look at them for
in
the person
love,
that they
I'll
are. Take the
say,
time to get to know them.
where
Take
she
the
thought
time to
she
learn
was in
about them,
deep, deep
learn what I
love,
like, what
but
I
it was
don't like.
not a
And because
calling
I knew
from
I wasn't
God.
ready for marriage,
And
I could
she
genuinely
had
be
to
their
learn the
friend,
hard
right?
way
I was
through
very
that.
transparent and I
And
led
she
with
wrote
that
a
from the
three-part
beginning.
book that's coming
And it
out
also it
this
led to me going
fall.
through a season of
And
I
it's
had
called
no
Faithfully
expectations,
Yours, A
none, because I'm
Journey
not
from
trying to marry you and I
Deception to
just genuinely want to
Promise.
be a friend.
And
I
she
was dating
felt
people who
as
necessarily
though
weren't
that
ideal
relationship
Christian people to
included,
date, right?
someone who
And I
was
was okay
counterfeit,
for that season. I had a lot of grace. I had
and who
accountability.
wasn't
Um, and it
doing
really helped, I think,
uh,
round me
what
out
they
to
needed to
create a
be
perspective
doing,
and
although they had met in
appreciation for
church, and
people as a
although
whole,
that
and make me
was,
more
you know,
relatable
what
and understanding and patient throughout the dating
what
process.
the what I guess what you would expect from meeting somebody in church is that they would be on the same level as you. But before Lauren got removed from the room, she was saying how you can also be unequally yoked in a relationship with a believer as well. So, Lauren, I was just refreshing the room there. It's so good that you're back with us, and I just want to allow you to continue, or I have definitely more questions for you.
Absolutely. I don't know why, but Clubhouse keeps kicking me out. I have all my bars over here. It's like the weird thing that happens with a date. I don't know what you last heard on this one. I know it kept picking up on the stream, so I'll pick up from there. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no worries, no worries at all. The last thing that really hit me was you talking about how people who are unequally yoked, they can both still be believers, and that doesn't necessarily predicate anything as far as your spiritual life. And so it's important. I know one thing that you said to me during our pre-interview was test the spirit by the spirit. And so that is just like, for me, that really stood out because it's like, if we are, if we're just focused solely on our relationship with God, then, the outcome is going to be that we may attract all kinds of things, but we're only going to recognize someone who is also in that same lane. So, my next question to you, though, is, with everything that you went through, as far as how you felt attached to the guy that that you went through all this with, I'm wondering, how did your upbringing contribute to your attachment style that you expressed in this relationship? Did you find that there were things in your relationship with your mom or your dad or even siblings that um, kind of encouraged you to like really latch on to certain expectations with that relationship?
Absolutely. I think having gone through lots of therapy since then, and continual therapy, right? Continuing to do the work, I have been able to identify several key factors that played a role into that were basically rooted back in my childhood. And so, one of which is that um, daddy issues. My parents divorced when I was 4. My mom moved my brother back to Chicago. We were raised there. We saw my dad. He wasn't completely not around. But it was in nature. But around the time that I kind of started to reach high school and became aware of things myself, I actually didn't talk to my dad for 6 years because of the trauma in dealing with. I felt rejected because he wasn't really taking care of my brother and I, but he had taken a whole other woman and her family in. And essentially we're taking care of her and her family. And so I could not, I felt, at the time I couldn't verbalize what it was, but it was rejection, right? From your dad. Like, why don't you love us enough to take care of us? Why don't you want us to be around? Why are you taking care of this woman and her family and her kids, right? So it was definitely a process of going through and healing from there. But ultimately, I think just having, not having that father figure around in that dynamic definitely had an impact and played a role for me to just not having that validation. There's something about a father being in a daughter's life at her, you're so precious, you're amazing, you're worth everything, right? To the point where I see it's kind of the reverse, and it happens where I see women who aren't doing the self work right now that they're older, they're grown, they aren't going to counseling or therapy, they aren't really in the church like that, but their dad validated them so much that you cannot tell them anything, honey. They are like, nope, I deserve the world, and I'm gonna get the world because I deserve it, even though their character doesn't reflect what they deserve right now because they haven't done the self work, right? But because their dad validated them so much, they know that they know that. And I think both are necessary. Both are components. You have to be self-aware and do the self-work. But also, a daughter needs validation from her father or a male figure in her life in a healthy aspect to let her know her worth, right? And so because I didn't get that growing up when I was doing the self-work, and also, Jesus and therapy, they go hand in hand. So doing self-work, finding the triggers, finding the root, but also my revelation with God and having to say, okay, God, my earthly father wasn't the best and didn't provide that, but you are, and you can. And so having to shift that and allowing him to fill me up in that, allowing him to give me my identity, my worth, and validation. And when that came in, when I got that from him, I was able to then kind of shift the parameters to forgiving my father, accepting, the love and the perspective that he was, and ultimately restoring that relationship with him. So I believe is the foundation. Not I
Nope, I
believe.
think we.
Go ahead. You lost me?
Oh no, I thought we lost you. No, keep
Oh,
going.
okay. Okay. Ultimately, I think that was just a catalyst for me. Um, I know for a fact God told me, he said, you have to restore the relationship with your father before I'm going to bless you with a man. Like, that's a part of the process, right? And so that has been a restorative process in the healing with that. And I know for a fact that has had a direct correlation with my relationships with men, and that now I can have healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, and I don't feel ashamed to say no, or stand my ground with what it is my expectation is. Like, hey, I deserve to be treated this way, and I want to be treated that way. And if you don't want to treat me that way, it's okay. I know that's not a reflection of me. That's just, we aren't on the same page with that, and I can gladly let you go because I've healed in those areas and I'm getting validated by God. I know my identity in Him, and even now since that relationship has been restored with my dad as well there too. So
I love that. I love that. And I love that you pointed out how important a father is for a daughter. I mean, fathers are important for all children, male and female. But you're onto something when you say that a young girl hearing from her father how amazing she is, how beautiful and smart she is, it gives her a different confidence in the world. It tells her that she can go out into the world and be that and be beautiful and be confident. And I personally, with my daughter, I'm grateful that her dad is involved in the way that he is to instill that in her, because I do see a difference in the confidence that she has at this age compared to the confidence that I had at that age with an absent father at the time. And I'm very
right,
grateful for my
that's so
father. I
good.
think, yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing because it's cool because I get to kind of, see clearly what the difference makes. I think we both are, me and my both good people, but there is a difference in the way that she shows up in the world, and I'm very proud of her, and I'm very excited for her because she won't have to deal with, although there may be other things, you know, overconfidence or whatever that we may need to battle, but we can take care of that as it comes. Um, you You said that you were working on healing that relationship with your dad. Has that happened? Like you had that one to talk that really helped you guys move forward in your relationship?
Forgiveness is about, and so, but ultimately reaching a place where I could say, okay, I forgive my father for not being there in my life the way that I expected or wanted him to be, right? And it's okay if I never get that. And when I finally reached that place and that point of being able to accept that, um, I was I was able to have some validation with that, right? And so once that happened, the transition, I was okay. I was able to start rebuilding and having a healthy relationship with him. And then the unexpected happened. Um, after after healing from the counterfeit, this is years later. This is about 5 years later, and my dad was still in the rebuilding phase. Where God started doing it happens after another relationship that I had. It wasn't toxic or anything on that level, but when the guy broke up with me, he told me it was contentious, and so it really really hurt me because I loved him and I never wanted to make anyone I loved feel that way. So I sat before God and I said, what is happening? Like, why do I make somebody feel this way? I never want to make anybody else feel this way at all, Lord. Like, how do I fix this? And he began to take me like through screenshots of my childhood and different, and some of them were people I used to talk to or date or friends that I was no longer friends with, but they were all men. And there were three in particular men that he said there was shots of the from literally childhood that I was like, oh my God, I don't even remember that. But Holy Spirit will bring it back to your remembrance. And he showed me screenshots of moments in those relationships where I had done to them the exact same thing that I had done to this gentleman that broke up with me. And God said, Lauren, it didn't, yeah, we can deal with it, but it didn't even start with him. Let me take you to the root issue of all of this. So he took me back into.
So Lauren, if you can hear me, I was streaming you speaking, but if you can hear me now, feel free to just start where you left off.
Okay, I'm back on here, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can't hear you here on Clubhouse though.
Can you hear me now on Clubhouse?
Nope,
No? Okay, hold on one
only
second.
on Instagram. Thanks, guys, for bearing with us. We are streaming the conversation online, um, and the Wi-Fi is not stable. But for those of you who just entered the room, hello, Miss Dorothy. It's good to see you. And Heya, that's beautiful. I hope I said that right. Sister Sharon, always good to see you. And Miss Carrie Ann and Sister Vivian and Dr. Crystal, thanks for joining us. And Kingdom Apostle Moses, good to see you. And Aaron, it's always good to have you here with us. We are talking with Miss Lauren about her life and her journey. And she is back with us. Yes, ma'am, I can hear you now. Yeah. Yes. Oh, good. Okay, perfect. Uh-oh, we can't hear you. Okay. You, yeah, so we just heard the screenshots and then you went out.
Okay, yeah. So God showed me screenshots of three individuals in my life that I needed to go apologize to: my dad, my stepdad, and my stepbrother. And so in that process, I reached out to all of them, and I didn't really even have the words, but I knew I needed to be obedient before I talked myself out of it. And so I called them and I apologized, and they said, "What are you apologizing for?" And all I knew to explain or could explain was the words that the gentleman told me for why he was breaking up with me, what I had done to him. And so when I told each of them that, hey, I apologize for being contentious. I apologize that you don't feel like I hear you out. I don't like your words aren't worth anything to me. there was silence on the other ends of the phone. And each one of them told me that they forgave me and that they 100% agreed with this man. And I bawled. I bawled. I was just in shock. Like, what? Nobody told me this. I've been doing this for years, and all the men in my life felt this way, and they didn't. It took a guy that I was dating to tell me this, and you guys could have basically saved me from having men break up with me if you guys would have told me. And so, all of that to get back to your question, my relationship with my dad and not getting an apology. I didn't expect it, but once I asked my dad for forgiveness for how I had treated him over the years, and I wasn't even aware that I was treating him that way, it caused him to apologize to me. And I never accepted that apology, and it shifted everything.
Yes, and sometimes we have to take that first step in showing someone how it is, maybe, I guess, how it feels to receive something so that they can feel inclined to maybe give it or even see that it's